An abandoned library, the sound of crying children, and a shape-shifting demon. These are some of the many elements you'll find in Stephen King's The Library Policeman, one of the novellas in 4 Past Midnight. No doubt, Stephen King has created some of the most terrifying villains over the years, like Pennywise, Randall, Flagg, and Barlow, but one of his most disturbing creations still lies under the radar. Meet Ardelia Lortz, the sinister librarian who, like Pennywise, terrorizes the kids, but in her own way is much worse. There are certain aspects in this story that make it downright unsettling rather than just creepy. No wonder no one wants to adapt it to the big screen. But if you keep your eyes peeled while watching it, you might just catch a peek at Ardelia herself. Who is Ardelia Lortz? And why does she deserve a place above Pennywise, or arguably any of King's most terrifying creations? Let's take a deep dive into this forgotten nightmare. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Is Ardelia Lortz worse than Pennywise? Before you tear me apart, might I say that I'm not undermining Pennywise. He's a true shape-shifting nightmare. But you see, while Pennywise feeds on fear and literally eats kids, Ardelia goes one step ahead and exploits them emotionally. Isn't keeping you alive in a nightmare way worse than simply finishing you off? Trust me, this one's gonna stick long after you finish the book. Ardelia Lortz, the librarian from your worst nightmares. Introduced first as the main antagonist in The Library Policeman, Ardelia Lortz seems like your typical old-school librarian. You know, the strict one to take a late book return way too seriously, but this one's much worse. She'll not only fine you for the books, but use your deepest fears to torment you psychologically. Now, before we go around calling this librarian the worst woman ever, let's clear something up. She's not really a human. Ardelia Lortz is actually an ancient, shape-shifting entity that hops from body to body like a parasite, using them up to serve her thirst for life and torture them before moving on to the next one. The moment she set foot in town, she killed the real Ardelia Lortz and seamlessly stepped into her new role as the town's librarian. And that was it for the city. Ardelia played the long game. The sinister legacy of Ardelia Lortz. Lortz's reign of terror began in the 1960s when she wormed her way into the lives of Junction City's people. A man named Mr. Lavin made the sore mistake of giving her a job at the local library, and from that moment, the town was doomed. Soon she seduced a young man named Dave Duncan and used him as a pawn for her twisted agenda of creating disturbing posters. Ardelia started to emotionally abuse the children under her care with scary fairy tales and brutal posters painted by Dave. Even when Mr. Lavin tried to stop her, she didn't take too long to kill the poor guy and took over the library completely. As time passed by, she decided to kill some children and then go into a dormant state with Dave. She murdered Patsy and Tom and nearly asked Dave to kill Tansy. But once Dave came to his senses, he realized the horror he was part of and tipped off Tansy's father, Deputy John Power. Like any father would, he decided to put a stop to this mentally abusive warfare, and in a desperate attempt to save his child, John confronted her at the library. But as imagined, that didn't end too well for him. She killed him and vanished, leaving Dave a broken man who was constantly haunted by guilt and trauma. But it's sad to say that Ardelia's terror survived long after she was gone. All the people she crossed paths with never truly recovered and developed severe PTSD. Dave Duncan, Willie Clemart, and Tansy Ryan turned into alcoholics decades later. Around 30 years later, in the present timeline of The Library Policeman, Ardelia decided to resurface as an old lady when a man named Sam Peebles walked into the library. She wanted to possess him and turn him into a new host for her, and all it took was 2 overdue books to set everything in motion. What began as a simple errand quickly spiraled into a nightmare for Sam, when she forced him to confront both supernatural horror and his deeply personal trauma. A bit harsh for delayed book returns, wouldn't you think? Once he couldn't return them, Ardelia decided to send him a terrifying reminder and came to his house as the library policeman. Now, this was more than just an urban legend coming to life, because the entity dug deep into Sam's mind and reminded him of a real-life monster who had physically abused him as a child. Traumatizing as it was, Sam decided to stop Ardelia with his friends, Naomi, Sarah Higgins, and Dave. Their battle led to a final showdown at the library, where Ardelia managed to kill Dave, but mortally wounded herself in the process. Needless to say, she didn't lose hope with that, because mortals were nothing more than a vessel to her. She tried to possess Naomi next, in an attempt to cling on to life any way she could. Sam didn't give up either. Ultimately, he did what anyone in Junction City should have done decades ago, and finished her for good. He tracked her down in her weakened state, and put her in the path of a speeding train. It was a well-earned end for a creature that had thrived on fear and suffering. Appearance. Ardelia's appearance changes depending on the form she takes. In her youth, she was described as a beautiful woman with pale skin, ash blonde hair, and striking gray eyes. Safe to say, she hypnotized everyone around her with them. What catches the eye deceives the heart faster, and her beauty makes it easy for her to manipulate people. This is mainly why she could slip into the community without raising an eyebrow. Later, in her librarian form, she took on the appearance of a plump, white-haired woman with a kind face that was deceptive enough to hide her sinister motives. But her true form is where nightmares begin. When fully revealed, Ardelia is an insectoid horror. Her body is swollen and her flesh is sagging beneath her neck like a rotting sack. Even her limbs have a claw-like, unnatural appearance. But perhaps her most terrifying feature is her proboscis. It looks like a grotesque feeding tube that she uses to extract fear in the form of tears. Not only does she drain the kids emotionally, but she consumes their very essence, leaving them nothing more than hollowed-out husks of what they once were. Personality. Ardelia is what we would call pure sadistic evil. Unlike Pennywise, who at least entertains his victims before killing them, her hobbies include breaking people emotionally, preying on their fears, and scarring them for life. Memories of psychological abuse creep in the human mind for decades, and she knows how to use that wisely. Ever since her first arrival in the city, she put on a mask of kindness to lure children in. But beneath that warm exterior was a predatory nature that enjoyed the suffering it caused. People are nothing more than a plaything for her, even her most devoted ones. Poor Dave. He fell in love with a demon and paid for it with his life. While her romantic relationship with him was nothing more than a ruse, she left no chance to use him to satisfy her means, be it his inappropriate paintings, or the fact that she almost made him kill someone. It also didn't take long for her to discard him once he was no longer fruitful. Abilities. Ardelia Lortz possesses a terrifying arsenal of supernatural abilities, each one deadlier than the other. One that truly stands out, though, would be her ability to shapeshift from an alluring young woman to an old hag. But it gets worse. She can transform into a person's deepest, most personal fear, like in the case of Sam, as seen earlier. This really made her a master of psychological manipulation. Ardelia also extracts fear like a parasite, drawing it out in physical form and resembling tears. In a way, her victims don't just experience fear, they're utterly consumed by it. Let's not forget, she can freaking possess someone. One might think, how could it get any worse? This one is more of a survival instinct, to be fair. If her physical form deteriorates because of any reason, she can possess another host by forcing her way into their mind and body. We see this when she strikes to take over Sam Peebles, and later partially succeeds with Naomi Higgins. Disturbingly, it's not a temporary thing either. Imagine a tenant who moved in with an intent to take over the house and replace the host's identity with their own. If that wasn't enough, Ardelia is also a master of illusions. She can alter reality by distorting surroundings and changing locations to suit her needs. Now that's some next level sorcery. Who would have thought that a demon could turn a simple library into her personal hunting ground? Weakness. Don't think she doesn't have any weaknesses, cause she does. But it's not what you would imagine. Oddly enough, paying the fine is her weakness. If you carefully noticed, Ardelia used Sam's overdue library books as a reason to torment him. But once he paid the fine, her hold on him weakened significantly. There's a certain symbolism hidden there. Ardelia represents fear, trauma, and child abuse. She takes someone's deepest horror and takes on that form. But once you pay the fine, i.e. face your fear, she can't really do much with you. Confronting one's fear is the only way to conquer them, and apparently also protect yourself from an evil hold. Marvelous verdict. So there you have it. Ardelia Lortz, a creature who doesn't just simply terrify us, but completely destroys us along with her victims. Ardelia's horror is slow and methodical. She doesn't feel the need to have balloons or sewers. Her drive to torment them in their own house is terrifying enough. The world ain't ready for a psychological horror that's so dark and real, and we would agree. But what do you think? Should Ardelia be recognized as one of King's greatest villains? Or is she even worse than Pennywise? Let's discuss this in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more deep dives. Thanks for watching, and whatever you do, never forget to return your library books on time, because you never know who might come looking for them.